What is in a name? For a writer, this is absolutely everything. Before a reader ever encounters your prose or your characters or even your plot twists, they first encounter your name. It sits right there on the cover, serving as the very first signal of what kind of story they're about to enter. But what happens when the name on your birth certificate doesn't feel like the right fit for your writing life? Whether you want to call them an author's pseudonym or a nom's de plume, or just your writing name, pen names have been shaping literary history for centuries. They are not tools for deception, but powerful forms of authorship. Today, we are going to dive into the history and psychology, if I'll call it that, or even the power of pseudonyms to help you decide if a pen name is right for your creative journey. At its core, a pen name is a name an author uses in place of their legal identity when publishing their work. It could be a completely invented new identity, or an initial, or a variation of your real name. Some even choose to rearrange their existing names. But it is also so much more than you think. The word pseudonym itself comes from the Greek roots, pseudos meaning false and onoma meaning name. But calling it false misses the bigger picture, because often pen names are used and are the truest version of a writer's creative self, especially if they want to be unburdened from family expectations or professional constraints. And most of the time, you'll find that these same writers have a day job and they do not want their day job to mess around with their author life. Writers have been using pseudonyms for a very long time in public writing, and the reasons for this haven't changed quite so much, because for some you'll find that ladies were writing in the 19th century under male names, because back in the day you would find that men or society would not accept to read feminine fiction, so they chose to write books and articles, poems and literature that has shaped today's literary world. You find that others could choose a more gender neutral name, so you wouldn't be able to tell whether it was a woman or a man who wrote these articles or poems or fiction or non-fiction books. The most recent one I can talk about is, for example, Stephen King, who has written various novels and novellas throughout history. Some of them have been turned into movies. For example, I think the most common one we might know is The Mist, if anyone has read that. We have also seen Under the Dome, which has also been turned into the movie or the TV series Under the Dome. We have seen various books by Stephen King, but over time, I think he also wanted to test whether it was his name that was famous or it was his art that was famous. And so he wrote a book as Richard Bachman, and for a couple of years he did that. Later on, he revealed that he indeed was Richard Bachman. I think a book, The Running Man by Richard Bachman, was one of the famous ones in the 80s. And it was quite intriguing because that was a huge success for him. He got to know that it was his art, his talent, that was appealing to people, not just his name, Stephen King. And that is quite an interesting reason for choosing a pen name as well. You also find authors like Nora Roberts, who chose a pen name wanted to write a different kind of story, and so she chose the name J.D. Robb to be able to write thriller, so that her romance novel readers would stick to her as Nora Roberts. But for thriller novels and novellas, then authors would go, or rather readers would go for J.D. Robb. Again, the reasons for choosing pseudonyms or pen names varies across centuries, across different authors, but it still has the same foundation. Some of the reasons you want to choose a different pen name today would be, for example, what Nora Roberts did. If you want to write a different genre from the current genre of your existing writing, for example, if you are a thriller seeker or a thriller writer, and for one reason or another, you find yourself compelled to writing a love or a romance novel, sometimes you would not want to mix up the two, and so you would go for a pen name to suit the romance novels, and that would also create a clear boundary not to confuse your audience at any one point in time. Another reason would be about gender. For example, if you look at J.K. Rowling's, who chose to use initials, because back then boys reading books written by a woman was not very common, and so for a long time people could not relate the name J.K. Rowling to a woman. And this would not mean that your work is not authentic. It's just that you would be appealing to a specific category of people that you want to appeal to. Another reason for this would be about territory. Sometimes you are writing to reveal some personal trauma, maybe secrets or political secrets actually, or family secrets, and you choose to use your pseudonym to act as an armor, therefore keeping your private life safe while allowing yourself to be radically honest using your pen on paper. Then there is also separation of your private from your public work. What do I mean by this? There's also the example, and we've seen many examples like this, where we have a teacher, kindergarten teacher, who is a really good writer of erotic or romance books that are not quite fitting with her career, and so they would choose to use a pseudonym so that they can protect their jobs, their day jobs, from their author jobs, for example. Another reason would be about discoverability, maybe. And this is quite a difficult one to actually talk about, because it's something that should not even be a reason, but it is, as is today. For example, you find that authors who do not have English names find it difficult for their work to be discovered in the global market, the global literary world. And so, for example, as African authors, or even Asian authors, most authors who have no English names, or who have chosen not to associate themselves with the English names, also find it quite difficult for their work to be discovered in the global market. And so they choose to have a pseudonym, a name that will be easily acceptable, discoverable, or even marketable. And that more or less is about choosing the comfort of others over yourself, which is a whole different topic to discuss. What is the psychology behind this kind of branding? For example, psychologically, and I'm not calling myself a psychologist, but if you want to look at it from that aspect, this pen name acts as a container for creative freedom. As soon as you know that nobody can link your pseudonym to you, you are free. And you then are giving yourself permission to step out of the grooves of your established self and to try something completely new. And there's also a major business case for this. In modern publishing, an author's name is their brand. And so a pen name will give you clarity in a way. You see, for example, if someone is called Rose and they want to write a horror novel or a thriller novel, so they choose to call themselves Raven Black. For example, if you also want to write romance and your birth name does not read the same, you would feel compelled to, for example, change the name to something sweet, something that will be acceptable by the romance novel audience. You have to start with purpose. Are you doing this for privacy, or is it just branding for your genre? That is the why that shapes the what. Then you also have to look for successful authors in your genre to let their naming conventions inform yours. Then say it loud, say it out loud, more and more and more. Spell it out, Google it to ensure that the name hasn't been taken by someone else. But say it, call out that name until it feels like it's yours. And also make sure that it fits. If you are going to go for interviews, or if you're going to be singing this name to your friends and your family and the world, it needs to feel like it's you who is actually the writer. That is if you want to also go out in the world and be known as the author of that work. So before we wrap up, there are some things that you will need to know about pen names in the publishing world. And the first is that pen names are legal, 100% legal. However, while you will be signing your contract and will be registering your copyright, you will be using your legal name. But your pen name will be the writing name. That is one of the small distinction, especially when you'll be signing your contract. The second thing is that your legal name will be used for payments and for taxes where applicable, and also for your bank account name, not your pen name. So your pen name will only be left to establish your authorship, but not for legal processes. Then again, if you want your pen name to have its own brand separate from yours, then you have to start registering your social media handles using that pen name early enough, so that when you publish, it is very easy and possible to maintain the same level of discoverability. So the one thing that needs to be absolutely clear is this pen name will be private only if you make it private. So you have to be very deliberate about keeping your personal details separate from your author platform, if you want to avoid the risk of, for example, being found out. If you want to keep it private, but if you want it to be public, then it's very possible for some of this information to be out there without it having any ramifications on your authorship vis-a-vis your private life.
So, as you brainstorm on your chosen pen name, I want you to think about one thing. What is it that you will be free to write in a different name that you would not be free to write in your own name? Tell us what you think in the comments below and hit that like button.